Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my returning guest is Terri Reese.
Mhm.
And Terri is running in New Jersey.
Correct. Mhm.
And we're going to talk about the lack of mentoring or the lack of continuity from one cycle to the next. So I think that's such a big problem.
Yes. Thank you again for having me back, Cynthia. I am thrilled to be here to speak with you about this topic. Yeah, I firmly believe that there is a lack of continuity in Congress, and it's or in politics in general, and it stems from, I believe, it's almost as though it's every man out for themselves. And people will talk about these are the things I want to do to make change. This is what I want to do to make change. This is how I'm going to do it. These are my ideas. And they do that. But then when they get into the halls of the Capitol, they're unable to build consensus for those ideas and they end up sitting, or they end up being the ideas that many other people have, but they don't get enough support behind them on both sides of the aisle in order to move forward. And then when those people end up leaving office, whether it's somebody who has been in office for a really, really long period of time, or it's a new person who goes into office, it's almost like those ideas or any kind of momentum is pushed off to the side. So we're not moving forward with critical ideas that need to move forward and get solved for the people in this country. And what you and I had discussed before was that I'm putting a term limit on myself of only 10 to 12 years if I'm fortunate and lucky enough and honored to be elected next year. And what I want to do during that time is to mentor young people within my district that are interested in moving forward and being and going into politics, so that the next person who comes up will of course have their own ideas, but there is a continuity in like what the platform is and what we want to do.
Right.
And it also comes from the highest level too. And right now I've been hearing a lot that the Democrats seem really fractured, that there's not like a one cohesive message that's moving forward in order to get us all on the same path. And what we've seen with the Trump administration, the second one, is that he was able to get all of the Republicans in line to go through with all of his plans that he wanted to get and push them through, whether it was through Doge or it was through that One Big Beautiful Bill Act. But we don't see the same passion, the same commitment on the Democratic side. And that's something that we need to build up as well.
I'm looking at it from a little different angle.
Okay.
I've been involved, and watched and volunteered for campaigns and became a candidate myself. And um, over the years, what I've witnessed is if a candidate runs
Hmm.
and they're not fortunate enough to win,
Hmm.
well, they just go away. They don't mentor the next generation. They don't
Hmm.
help the next generation. So every election cycle, the wheel is reinvented. And I think that because everybody who runs for office or anybody who does anything in life has a certain story to tell.
Hmm.
And if you had run for office and you've got certain tips that you want to pass on and
Hmm.
you don't, then who ultimately loses but the people who vote for you?
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And what I know is on my own path when I started this back in April is that I reached out to my state committee, I reached out to the national committee, and I reached out to different websites as well. Like, I want to run for office. What are the tips and tricks or resources that you have that you can share with me? And they shared websites. Here's a list. You can do this, like that kind of thing. But there wasn't really, like you said, a mentor that would say, this is what you need to do. This is how you do it. I did have a former candidate reach out to me after he saw that I had declared, and he offered to be a resource in any way that I needed for information wise. And he gave me the rundown on what he did with his campaign, but his campaign was very different than mine, because I'm running a 100% grassroots campaign, which hasn't been done in this area before as much as it really needs to be. And so trying to get people who did work in previous grassroots campaign has been really, really hard because luckily, like Andy Kim did it, but his people are all still working with him right now and are very busy in working with him in the Senate and aren't able to provide support. But that's what I want to do is I think it's really important is I'm collecting all of my notes and I'm making a really nice list of the things, the people I've contacted, the steps that I have taken so that I can share that and be the resource for the next person who is coming up as well.
I think that's wonderful because that is so lacking today, and
Hmm.
somebody stepping up to the plate has no clue what to do.
Hmm. And two, there are a number of different organizations that once you announce for office, that they just bombard your email, with information like hire us, hire us, hire us, hire us, hire us. But when somebody's starting out with a campaign at the get-go, unless they're self-funded or independently wealthy or have like a bunch of backers behind them, that money isn't necessarily there.
Hmm.
So how can people get information on like the best practices and what to do moving forward if there isn't somebody to tell them what to do? And so I just reached back out to them and I said, thank you so much. But at this point, I'm a grassroots candidate and I'm working with volunteers and we're going from there. And if something could change, I'm happy to reach back out. Luckily, the people who are working with my campaign have worked on campaigns in the past as volunteers, but in different areas. So they weren't necessarily, I was the chief finance guy, or I was the chief campaign manager, or I was the volunteer coordinator. It was like what I did is I supported her, and this is how I supported her, and this is what we did in the campaign. And likewise with the others. So we are learning as we go. And a lot of what I'm doing are things that I feel are best for, or what I would like to see a candidate to do when they're running for office.
Hmm.
So,
And a lot of times, like if a candidate does not win
mhm,
and they don't, they might not get the support from the party that they feel that they needed to get, they just walk away very disgruntled,
mhm,
just throw their hands up and say, I'm not going to do this or get involved anymore.
mhm.
That's too bad.
It is, and we've seen that happen here in our district several times. Um, and that's something that I told when I was on a call with someone before was that I fully plan on winning this election, but if I don't, I'm happy to support and throw my support 100% the person who does because we definitely need to flip it. And that's how I am. And then what I would like to do is get more intricately involved with the party at the local, county, and state level as well to bring systematic change on helping candidates win their elections.
What I've learned over the years is, you said you wanted to help the party,
Hmm.
but these people are so entrenched and they've got their little fiefdom,
Hmm.
and they're not going to do anything to change that. So a lot of times a candidate is just collateral damage.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. And I do know, and that's one of the things that I've been talking about with a number of people working on my campaign is if you're not the party darling, if you don't have connections into the party bosses, you really don't get a chance to go anywhere. But what we've seen happen is the people who are being promoted by the party bosses, are they really affecting change? Are they doing things that are really good that are in there, or are they just occupying a seat? And are they doing the bidding of the party bosses as opposed to doing the bidding of the people that they represent?
Mhm.
And I don't mind getting support from people who have, connections in politics or, that have run this path before. Like, I think that's all great and that's fine. But I'm going to answer to my constituents, the people who live in the district, not follow a party line because this is what the leader says that we have to do. Like, what is best for the people in South Jersey? This is what we need. This is what we need to vote for, and not necessarily say, well, we're all going to do this just because, and I'm not talking about the shutdown. I understand that the shutdown needs to, it's on, the two sides need to come together and just and come up with a viable, workable solution that isn't going to rip away healthcare from tens of millions of people, so that they can open back up. But at the same time, I think that a lot of it is very performative. And people want their 15 minutes of fame. They want to be able to get their name in the headlines. They want to get all the clicks, that they're really not looking out as to what's in the best interest of the people and working that way. And what I feel is that it's just gotten worse and worse with the advent of the internet going on, the media that is becoming more and more partisan, as much as we have some that aren't partisan. It's a very small group, but then you can always see the ones that are leaning one way or the other. And that the headlines and the way that things are presented not in a factual manner. So this is what happened today. These are the actions that took place. These are this is the outcome of those actions, but there's always a spin to it, so that they can almost make it appear or appeal to either side of the coin. And that's what we see happening with our elected officials as well. And it used to be where the Republicans liked a small government, with less regulations. The Democrats were a larger government, but more for the people. But now it's like, it's almost that one side is comfortable with lying and not saying the whole truth on how it's going to affect people, because it either inflames their base or gets them more clicks or votes.
You know, what do you see? This is a tough question. What do you see as the solution?
So, what I see as the solution is that first we need to elect more homegrown grassroots candidates who aren't beholden to party bosses. That's number one. Number two, I think we need to have go
Uh,
ahead.
Stop right there. The party bosses want to remain in control. And
Mhm,
I'll give you a good example. My significant other ran. I live in Albany. He lives in Troy,
mhm,
New York. So a few years back, he ran for, oh, I forgot what seat it was. But him and a bunch of his friends wanted to have change in the party leadership. Well, the party leadership did not like that.
mhm.
So came election night, or when they were counting the ballots or the absentee ballots, um, most of the absentee ballots went to the opposing party because the party bosses in his party, the Democratic Party, did not want an upstart like that. So they do
Mhm.
things to ensure that they stay right where they are.
I agree. And that's why the people need to make a change. And I'll get you go back even further than that when we look at what happened with Gerald Ford. So Gerald Ford, he was a Republican, and some of his stances and views were very progressive at the time. Um, and the party bosses weren't happy with that. They didn't want to progress. They didn't want a progressive Republican. They wanted a conservative Republican. And what they did is they ended up working with um, the Democratic leaders to get Jimmy Carter elected. And Jimmy Carter was a wonderful man, a great humanitarian. That was wonderful. But they used those 4 years in order to identify and build up Ronald Reagan. And then they knew that they had that 4 year buffer, that they were going to turn anything that he did around in 4 years once Reagan was elected. And that's what happens, is that we have people who are behind the scenes who are pulling all of the levers in order to get who they want in office. And it needs to be handed back to the people. And I know that that sounds like a lofty goal, but if enough of us speak out and enough of us stand up, then it's something that can change. Because these party bosses as well, they're not living forever. So it might not be a change that happens right away, but there is going to be a change, and the change is coming.
You know, I watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Hmm.
I have YouTube TV.
Hmm.
So one of the videos that I always look at is a young woman by the name of Sabrina Salvati, and she's from Boston,
Hmm.
and she's a young black woman, and she talks about the leadership in the Democratic Party, the Hakeem Jeffries
Hmm.
and Cory Booker,
Hmm.
and she's not happy with them. And she said it's time for them to leave. But she's not offering any solutions on her vision of how they're going to leave. I mean, she complains about them, but then she kind of like eh, drops it and,
Hmm.
she doesn't offer any solutions.
Yeah. And that's why we need to, change comes from within. So what we need to do is the people, and I think that we're seeing change. We're seeing people that aren't happy with the current status quo. I participated in the No Kings rally over this past weekend that were double, at least double what they were before, the last time when we did it in June. So people are getting upset. They're very disenfranchised with what's going on, and they want change. They want effective change to happen. And they know they're not getting it from the current people who are in office, or the people currently in office, I should say. And once we get into office is where we'll be able to make the best amount of change that we can with a good progressive Democratic caucus going in, where we're able to rewrite or enforce the ethics rules, which have literally been thrown out the window. It's almost like anything goes and you can do whatever you want. Where we're holding our elected officials accountable with the rules that are set aside to doing their jobs. So, for instance, right now, what we're seeing that's happening with the representative that was elected in Arizona, who still hasn't been seated by Mike Johnson, and he's claiming, well, it's because we're not in session. Well, they're not in session because you put everybody on vacation because you don't want to vote, you don't want to debate, and you don't want to vote on this continuing resolution. You just don't want to even talk about it. And that's, to me, is obstructionism. That's
Oh,
not.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I had interviewed the Republican candidate who ran in this special election.
Mhm.
And we talked over and over again. And I'm one of the to-do lists on my to-do list today is to call him. He told me over and over and over again that he got no help whatsoever from the party.
Mhm.
Okay. So he did not get any help from the Republican Party. The Democratic woman won,
Mhm.
and Mike Johnson is holding everything up.
Mhm.
But if Mike Johnson was really, and the other people in Washington were really serious about gaining a majority in the House, they would have support, my friend in Arizona, but they didn't. So people know half the story.
Mhm. Yeah. And I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that the power brokers that be will look at a race and they will determine, is this a race that we want to be involved in? And if the answer is yes, it'll be probably because, can we win? If we can win this race, if our candidate can win this race, then yes, we are 100% behind them and we will go that way. As opposed to having a more open and broad mind, looking at it and saying, so we have some great candidates here. How can we make our great candidates even better? How can we help them to succeed so that we can win this race? Instead of looking at things and instead of looking at a particular race and saying, we're not going to win this, we're not even going to try.
When that even going to try, that's it.
Yes. Yes, without even going to try. And that defeats the whole purpose. It's then where you're allowing party bosses and not the people to choose who their elected officials are going to be. And that's
Mhm.
one of the things I was talking about with my team the other day is that Why I believe that money has to get out of politics. We need to reverse or repeal Citizens United. We need to put robust campaign finance reform that limits the amount of dollars that can be donated at one time, how much can be spent at one time. And I would like to see a public funding option where it's spread out amongst candidates equally, and then the candidates then choose if they're going to spend, where they're going to spend their, the money that's going in, instead of having $16 billion
Mhm.
put forth in an election when that could have been used for vital services that have been cut with this bill.
Right. And I'm going back to my like of watching YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a number of um YouTube videos. Like I have my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about what's going on and complain about it and stuff. But what are you going to do about it? They don't do anything. And, I'm I'm trying my best to get everybody's voice, out
Mm-hmm.
there. And I'm one person, and I don't know how effective I'm gonna be in the long run. And it's a daunting experience, but I know that if you and other people who are running who don't get the recognition from the press and the party, and you don't get donors at your door every day. I'm trying hard to get your message and the other message out, and I feel it's important, and people should realize that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they should. And I appreciate everything you do. I think that that's absolutely wonderful. And it's to one of those things that you're talking about, the other people who are on YouTube that you watch, that like, well, what are you doing? How like you can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but what are you doing? And that's one of the reasons why I ran for office, is because I can sit and I can talk about the change that needs to happen. I can talk about ideas that should be put forth, and if I'm just sitting at home not doing anything about it, it's just talk. And that's why I decided to run. Because, as I told you in our first, the first time we chatted, is that when talking with my son, and he had said, you have great ideas and you can do this. You can do this, you can affect change, you can be the change you want to be, go out there and do it. And that's what I think is important. And I reached out when I announced to several of my family members who are on the other side of the aisle. And I told them, I said, I know we don't share the same views in politics. However, I wanted you to know that I'm doing this, just so that you didn't hear it, through the grapevine or social media. And their response was, good for you. Instead of sitting home and just talking about it, you're actually doing something and
Mhm.
trying to make change. So I think that that's really, really important, because we have tens of millions of people who are sitting at home and just talking about it and not, well, what can we do? What are how can you make change? For me, I'm running for office so that I can bring my ideas to the table and I can do things for the people.
And I'm making videos.
Which are great.
So,
And your videos have content that are helping to promote people who want to make change as well. So it's not just like we're just sitting here chit chatting about this should all happen. And if it does, it does. It's like you're actually out there helping people who want to do good.
right, right, right. So, over the course of your campaign, would you come back on Focus on the Candidates and talk about what we've discussed today?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
I would
Great.
love to. I
Good.
love to talk.
Well, that's very important,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you have a busy day. I've got a busy day. So you've been listening to Terry Reese. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focused on the Candidates. And if you like the show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And don't forget about August 1st, National Candidate Recognition Day. And and I just want to create a holiday because on July 4th we're going to be celebrating our
Mm.
250th birthday.
Hmm.
So on August 1st, I want to honor all those people who have tried so hard to keep democracy alive for our 250th birthday.
That's excellent. That sounds wonderful.
Thank you. And
Mhm.
thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.